that's the subject that we're talking about right now. Obviously, in the room we already have Joshua, Pinda, and Yael. Thank you guys very much for coming in. We will be expecting you guys to let us know where are you from. Even if you're in the kingdom, let us know. Are you coming in from Peaks Peak in Tlangano, Simunye, Big Bend, Mbabane or Manzini? But if also you are somewhere in the world, let us know exactly where you are, because we want to know just how much of a global community we have with us here this morning.
Lovely. So let's look at what's been happening this week. Hey, what have you noticed? What are the stories you've picked up on?
So obviously the Madagascar tonic is picking up a lot of traction, you know, and we were just, I think we were having this conversation yesterday that why is it that when a remedy comes from the West, we call it medicine, and when it comes from Africa, we call it a concoction.
Or muti.
Or muti. What's going on with that? We need to sort of like review that. What's going on?
Well, it's stepped up. It's now a tonic.
Oh, okay.
So we're slowly bridging the gap. So you'll remember last week we came out with it. There was a lot of write-up in the press, even on social media.
Yeah.
Lots of people had ordered it, and we were now saying, well, this is not a cure for COVID. And I think what we need to understand is we are very far from the actual cure. But as if I had a flu, I would take some supplements and things to help boost my immunity. Essentially, I think what the tonic has come out to say is this has properties that can really help our immunities, and it's good. So at this time, I think it's just something that that has been discovered. And so now what I think is so exciting about the story is, firstly, we needed to know, oh, is this something that we can formally say can help within the COVID space? But what's great, and this is what I heard in recent studies, is that what they're actually going to do now is, instead of getting WHO to sign off on it, we are going to import it into the region, and our own labs are going to test it to be able to then give us some scientific background. But, you know, and this is what the debate is coming up. Do we always have to wait for things to be signed off by a specific body? Can we perhaps initiate some of these things and be able to provide the backup or the backstory, and to be able to inform people as to what is in the tonic and how it can actually help us, which I think is so exciting.
Absolutely.
So regional laboratories coming on board to say, let's import it, let's test it for ourselves, and then be able to inform our people what is actually in this and how it can potentially help us. So good, we're getting clarity in that space.
Absolutely, from the outside in and not always from the inside out, you know what I mean? We definitely do have the capacity to actually inform the direction that maybe the medicine industry can take. I don't know, Joy, what's your take on that? Like, are you familiar with the plant, or maybe its properties? Do you have any knowledge?
We have it, I think we have it locally.
We have it locally, and my take on it is that look, we were part of the Abantu migration from west to East Africa, right down to populate this area.
All right.
For sure, we had remedies.
Absolutely.
And they had no laboratories
at
that point in time. I'm not against the formalization of that processes, but we do have properties that can help us cope with this.
Okay.
Yes.
And it should be taken into consideration as medicine, rather than the semantics that you are playing around. And these medicines of ours, which have been expropriated and turned into tablets because we are too slow in the implementation of the testing systems. So we survived. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for those natural remedies.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and you know, you're just making me think of a story, Joy. So, my son was obviously, he's a sports fanatic, and he had fractured the bone that runs in the arm here. And when we were thinking, how are we going to get this bone to heal quickly? And we spoke to a malume. He said umhlabelo.
Yes.
So every morning he would take a shot of umhlabelo.
Yes.
He even knew, he said, Mom, it's better when it comes out of the fridge.
Yes.
It's less strong.
It's got a kick.
But religiously, and I think he had a 6-week break before he was racing. His next race was coming up, and there was no way he was going to miss this race.
Yes.
And every morning he would drink mhlabelo. Him and his friend both had injuries at the time, and they came back, went to the doctors tested and were amazed. They said, what did you do? 4 weeks later, he was back on his bike and riding. And we actually had a joke about it. We thought, no, we must go to Joburg and start selling it in bottles to all the sports people. So yeah, absolutely. We had all this before, and I think we've forgotten about it. So yeah, it does work. So lovely little story there. What else has been happening?
All right, so today is the International Nurses Day, and I think now more than ever, we definitely do recognize and appreciate the work that the men and women in the medical space are doing. We're definitely in a space right now that needs all hands on deck, and we appreciate the time, the effort, the sacrifice that you guys are making out there. Siyabonga. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Absolutely. I think just to recognize the frontliners across the world, not just in our Eswatini, not actually in the region, not on our continent, but across the world, the people who are selflessly putting their lives aside to help others and to really push through this. It's incredible. And I think, you know, obviously we've seen across the world how people have been applauding the first line helpers. But we just want to applaud you in the screen and just to say, you know, thank you very much for the sacrifice you're making for others to heal, to be well, and for you know, just within our space. So we just want to applaud you. So across the world, we just say thank you very much for what it is you do, and we'd like to ask any partners, any clients there today, if you're in the food industry or in delivery industry, if we can just maybe make a small gesture to say thank you, deliver some food for lunch, for a meal. As you know, they're running shifts. Nurses are not resting, and they are really very important in this fight against COVID and keeping our nations and our people safe. So please, let's deliver something, even if it's a snack. If you bake, let's send a cake, some biscuits, something nice, just to say thank you. I think that would be a lovely gesture. Just to remember them and to let them know that we're thinking of them. So yeah, thank you to our nurses today.
Absolutely. And of course, one of the biggest news that's on the streets right now is there has been a shift or a movement. Like we said, every week looks different in this COVID-19 period. And this week, we sort of like kickstarted our economy again. What does that mean? That a couple more businesses have been opened or allowed to operate again, as we're now slowly trying to get things, trying to get into a rhythm that will allow us to strive and survive during this COVID-19 period. And of course, when that happens, there's always going to be confusion around who needs to open, who can open, who cannot open, why, when, and how.
So we're sort of still in this confusing space, right? We understood that this was always going to be we're learning on the job, step by step. Let's see how it goes. So yeah, there were confusions. So obviously today, and it's still in the paper, it's navigating the church assembly space. How many people can we reopen churches, yes or no? And I think the MPs are going to be deciding on that and coming out with clear communique. I don't know if anybody was in the Matapa area this weekend, but there was actual pandemonium at Mahala. The bottle stores were opened. And I think the line wrapped around the whole shopping mall. And eventually, and sort of cops had to come in to allow people just to respect the social distancing and to manage the space. But literally from sunrise to sunset, there were people Friday and Saturday. And now they've decided to close it. I think it was just too much.
Shelley, I don't know if you have info on this, but word on the street is people were actually camping overnight, like as they were setting up as early as 1 a.m. in readiness for the opening
of the bottle store.
Of the bottle stores.
But you know what is bringing up in my thoughts right now, sitting here, is that we have such dependencies. Whether it's alcohol or religion. We want to flood into. We are not used to living without alcohol. We're not used to living without our pastors. And we flushed into the spaces where we kind of reaffirm our confidence or find a way of managing and coping with the stress, because it is scary not to have that access to things that feed us, where emotionally, spiritually, And this is what the story of the alcohol and the churches is bringing out for me.
Oh,
yeah.
Sure.
wow.
Very interesting.
Definitely, definitely, because it was definitely quite a deep end for a lot of people to be thrown in probably the most stressful time or period in our lifetime, and then your coping mechanisms are taken away. So it is definitely, it has been a true test or challenge to the individual, to the human being, in terms of just like, what else can you fall back on? What else can you go to? You know, when your usual sort of like coping mechanisms are taken away. But
and it's the habits, right? And
Yeah.
I think, and it's this thing is also freedom of choice. So I like to stay at home, but the minute you say you must stay at home, all of a sudden I want to get out. You know, the minute you say if I'm able to have a glass or go and purchase a bottle of wine, I'm happy. The minute you say no, you can't go and purchase, I all of a sudden want it more. So it's interesting how behaviorally and in our spaces, the minute we are very dictating on those terms and conditions, we want it more. And when there's a freedom for availability, we are sort of more relaxed in that space as well. So that's also quite interesting.
So there was actually somebody saying that they, before the lockdown, they were sort of like an introvert. They preferred to stay at home in their private space. But as soon as the lockdown is lifted, they are going to every single event. They will even go to the opening of an envelope, as long as they just have to leave the house and go somewhere.
To the post office, just to go and have an envelope stamped.
Something.
Something. Okay, so we've got some more people joining us. Good morning to you. Good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. It could be a different time zone. We have Kevin, we have Felicia, Bridget, Kim, Martin, I'm looking there, is it Charlene? Kevin Thring, good morning. Dumsani from Finco, lovely to have you, sir. Philippa, Wincy, Sandra, Sue, thank you so much for joining us. Please tell us where you're from. I know many of you are regulars and we love you, and you're joining us again, so thank you very much. But let us know where you're from, if you're from the wonderful Eswatini, or if you're from somewhere else in the world. We just want to give you a shout out and say hello. So thank you for joining us. As you know, we're talking leadership, a very important subject. All our subjects are important, but I think it's nice to actually just go into the space of leadership. So if you're joining us, I hope you have your questions ready. If you don't, please be inspired by what we're chatting about in the room today. We are with Joy, if you're joining us. Lovely Joy and Dwandwe is with us this morning. And so we're going to jump a little bit into that topic for the day. But thanks for joining us. Please remember, if you are on Facebook, we are also on YouTube and Instagram this time. Yes. Instagram. So please, whichever platform is best for you, where you're getting the best quality sound and pictures, please log on to those different platforms, and please invite your friends and family as well.
All right.
The more the merrier.
Before we dive straight into it, shout out to Linda Rego, Pinky Nyandoro, and of course Daniel Toro in the background, making sure that we come to you live and direct. That's the technical team that's handling business behind the scenes. Thank you, of course, once again to Net Worth, our sponsor for this here live stream. Then, of course, the Pacific Institute for allowing us to use these lovely, lovely premises. But of course, thanks to you for tuning in this morning, because this is who this is all about. Welcome Cara, Elena, and Cindy Siwe. Guys, please forward your questions, your comments, your queries as we're having this discussion about leadership in crisis. And of course, when we're talking about leadership, we're going to have to dive straight into the subject of identity as well. And I believe our guest in the studio will help guide us in that direction. Shelley and I are just facilitators of this conversation. We are by no means experts. You guys are. You guys probably know a little bit more, and that's why we're inviting questions, comments, and queries. Shelley?
Great. Thank you so much. So I think we're going to jump into it. As you said, leadership in crisis. It could mean a few things. Is leadership in crisis at the moment? or are we talking about leadership in a moment of crisis?
Yeah.
So we left it to you to decipher, ladies and gents. So we'll see which way you leaned on that one. But I think just to jump in, I'd like to introduce Joy. So I met Joy a number of years ago, and I will remember the first time we met. I was with a dear friend, Yael, and you were talking about your book at the time, Akusigo Gwami Gwebantu. And you did a presentation on the book, and you asked us to sign up, and so we did. And then one morning, so beautifully, you arrived at the offices. I was at Gone Rural, or Bomage Rural Projects, as we know it, at the time. And I remember seeing you in the doorway, and you were like, hi, and we both sort of jumped up, hello, and you were delivering the book in person. And I thought that was such a beautiful gesture. And ever since then, we've had a crush on you, Joy, and we're consistently having teas and coffees, wanting to know what you're doing and what you're learning. And so we're very excited for you to be here today, sharing that with us. But just to let you know a little bit more, so as you know, Joy is an author. Akusigo Gwami Gwebantu, Unearthing King Sobhuza II's Philosophy is the title of one of your books, but you've also written another two books, am I right? And one is called Releasing Monkeys.
Yes.
And the other is Spirit of Kwanzaa.
Yes.
Okay. Now this book, Akusigo Gwami Gwebantu, you will be releasing second editions, hey?
Yes.
Okay, very soon. So Joy Dumsile Ndwandwe is your full name, okay? And Joy is also completing her doctoral studies at the moment at the University of South Africa, research chair on development education. But I think what's also really inspiring is you are currently pursuing the establishment of your spiritual and academic project, which is the Indigenous Knowledge Hub.
Yes.
And I'm always so curious in that space. So really around indigenous knowledge, and I specifically love that space. And what it really is, it's about integrating modernity with indigenous knowledge, and it's embedded within dignity, values, governance, and the list is endless in that space. And I'm hoping you'll just share a little bit about your research and your thinking in that space as we delve into it. So indigenous knowledge, Joy, can mean many things for many people.
Yes.
Share with us your view or your take when you say indigenous knowledge.
Okay, thank you very much. We've had a very, very amazing journey on indigenous knowledge, working with you with Gone Rural, and now we're here today. But what is of interest to me is that I started this journey with the King Sobhuza book, and then I landed in indigenous knowledge because I studied accounting.
Oh, wow.
And I went into municipal finance. And when that career ended, when I retired at 42 years old, I started this journey. And that sort of puts it into perspective of how I had absolutely no idea of where it's going to end. And now it's resonating within my soul into this spiritual and academic project that I'm working on. And therefore I needed to have a PhD to be able to be legitimate in this space, because this is an absolutely new space for me. It's only 16 years and you met me 10 years ago. So, but what indigenous knowledge, how I've, in the 16 years of this journey, how I've put my nail on the indigenous knowledge space is that I look at epochs. I look at the prehistoric, historic, and contemporary. And therefore, when I do research, fortunately, archaeologists and other academics have done that preservation of that prehistoric knowledge systems and the historic. So that's how I contextualize that. If it comes from a prehistoric era and a historic era, that's indigenous. Because what we have now in the contemporary space has been infiltrated by so much modernity, and infiltrated and not integrated. Because that's why the institute that I'm striving to establish was to integrate. And when you integrate, you're saying this is knowledge within its own right. And therefore it's not begging for acceptance, which is what the historic pretty much did to our knowledges, is that it begs for space in the academy as it's built by the Western school of thought. So we're saying we want to integrate this indigenous knowledge with modernity because it's a knowledge within its own right. And that's what the spiritual and academic project wants to do.
Sure, that's beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm very excited
and leadership
about that. Yes.
is one very important aspect that I did my master's on. And I was looking at how can we basically say everything that we are is only based on the historic aspect of our lives, which is colonialism and apartheid.
Well, it's interesting, Joy, that you say that, and I think we've had this discussion.
Yes.
So often,
Yes.
our story starts there.
Yeah, no.
And we forget that there was an existence and stories that
which I call the prehistoric epoch.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
where I come
But our
from.
story
Yeah.
often starts with slavery or
Yes.
occupation
Yes.
or, and I think we need to be, and I love that, we need to almost shift the lens. There is a
Yes.
story before that.
I like the
and there's
fact
a
that
lot
you
of freedom and other things that come in that story. And if we started our story or his story in that space, it would flow and result in a very different way of thinking. Am I right?
Fortunately, UNESCO has done a fantastic work. There are volumes, about 8 volumes of research that's been done from the prehistoric to the contemporary. And that's where I get most of my evidence from.
Okay.
And imagine this, walk with me and imagine this journey that was taken by our forefathers when they decided to move out of the equatorial and the Rift Valley to populate this area. What did it take? It took basic innovation, which was either the stone or the iron, because we were at that stage, to just cut the first forest for us to channel our energy into populating this area. That's where leadership comes from. The person who cut the first and said, this space is no longer enough. I am going to look for other land. And here we are finding ourselves in this part of the world because we had leaders who decided to go against all odds and believe that there is this place called Southern Africa. And when you walk with that journey that has been recorded by academics, then you realize how much leadership resources we've had. And they walked with barely nothing. Seeds, barefooted, respecting the cows because they needed the cows, so nobody was jumping on the ox. They were walking with the cows. Sure. And you can imagine what it means when you start looking at the Zambezi River. When you start thinking of the mountains, the amount of leadership that needed to organize people. And of course, there had to be surveying of lands and looking at natural waters where you can now plant the sorghum. We were on sorghum that time. To plant and wait for the harvest so that you continue with the journey. So that organizing all those people required a lot of leadership. And in my research, that's what has been fascinating. And what was I looking for? I was looking for the principles that were driving this, because it cannot just be organized chaos. There had to be driving principles. And what I found 5 principles that were driving this migration south.
Please share with us, what are those 5 principles?
This is belief in the Supreme Being.
Okay.
There had to be tremendous belief in Supreme Being. And it's not boxed in a religious context. It's just a spiritual belief there's a Supreme Being. That's why people were following the sun. And today we have a Malangeni. They were following the sun during the journey. All of those totemic, with Dlamini cutting his own path and Ndwandwe cutting his own path and Sibanza cutting his own path, everybody was following some totemic energy. But that totemic energy was centered around this fundamental belief in the Supreme Being. Ntu is the unifying, because we are all Abantu in this region. We're all descendants of Abantu in this region. Ntu was what was channeling this energy, and that's the Supreme Being. And therefore that was the first principle. Whatever we do is we believe the Supreme Being will guide us. And then cosmic and social order believing that the best place is to place people. As leaders, we must place people in their context. And that's why you find this connectivity within tribes and clans. It is based on that cosmic and social order. To create that order, you had to have these formations that were following a particular leader, and this leader of the clan became a source of identity. Therefore, the resonance between the followership and the leader was based on that clan and tribe and totemic relationship. And there was also harmonious human existence and coexistence. And all of these were in harmony and coexistence with nature, the ecology, the people's ecology. We had to manage the ecology. We had to know that, oh, now the monsoon is going to come.
Yes.
Therefore, how do we make sure we escape this environment? We had to make sure we deal with famine.
Yes.
If at all, some people had to be eaten by Amazimu, that mythology, it came from somewhere, because some had to survive. We're here in this region. There's no doubt that a lot of sacrifice. You can imagine the crocodiles in those rivers. Some people had to be sacrificed. All this was in the spirit of understanding that there has to be that common objective of finding and settling into a world that we now call our own, called Sadak. And that, to me, is exemplary of the historical context of our leadership, the strength. But the 5 principles stand out for me in its supreme being, its cosmic and social order, harmonious human existence and coexistence. And for me, when you ask me, is leadership in crisis, I look at this 5. Belief in a supreme being, in a holistic sense. Once you start bringing in discrimination and religious intolerance, to me, you're not talking the supreme being. Because you are now negating the supreme being. Cosmic and social order of people. I intertwine those two because they're very close. For you to have the cosmic order, it will enthuse social order. Once you have a cosmic disorder, there'll be no social order in your life.
And you're basing it on.
You're basing it on that. And then the harmonious human existence also emanates from that.
Sure.
We experience crisis because there is no way you could have this organized grouping without crisis.
Facing crisis,
We were traders, excellent traders, actually. So much has been excavated by archaeologists. It's amazing of our trading abilities, that we were also crafts. We made calabash. We made so much innovation. That's why it fascinates me. What happened to iron? The only time I hear Africans are carrying iron, it's my churches when they're going to hack each other. And yet we come from an innovation space. We let go of our innovation when we started trading. Some of our innovations were depleted through that time. But one of the worst crises we ever did, where we lost control, was the slave trading. Because slave trading started as a phenomena of cleansing or detoxing spaces of criminality within our and there was also a caste system
it was established,
which was established around that. But when we lost control, because international traders started demanding more, and they created buffer communities to lead that trading, then those buffer communities totally disregarded the nobility. Noble people became slaves, and they were sold. So we were in crisis.
So I love that. So obviously there's something that we lost. I mean, that story that you're telling me, it almost brings me to tears, Joy, because that's what we are made of.
Yes.
But we seem to have forgotten it.
We were lost. We lost
it. And we're going to come as to what is it potentially that allowed us to lose it. But there's a lovely question that has come up from Dumsani Msibi. He says, the greatest difficulty for leaders is the uncertainty around the situation that we find ourselves in. Okay? Your troops are looking for direction from you as a leader, yet you are also in the dark. So coming back to just what you've spoken about, they also faced crisis. It's not to say that there were no crises in that
Yes.
So what is it that we may have lost that now puts us in the situation like Dumsani is sharing, where we have a followership that is looking for leadership to give identity, to give direction, and yet the leaders themselves are also feeling like, I don't know.
Yes.
What are we saying about that? And maybe, Joy, also the other thing is, why do we also always look to a specific, is it normal that we look to a CEO or someone? Is leadership not something that is in all of us?
Yeah.
That's the fundamental crux of our problem. That's why I thought when you're bringing me to talk about leadership in crisis, is that whole energy of uncertainty, of populating the space.
Okay.
And we are alive today because of uncertainty. There was no certainty at that time. So I appreciate that question of the current situation of uncertainty, because we survived through uncertainty, because there was a resonance between the leadership and the followership, and the times when the leaders had to be led by the followership, which we've lost. A sense of people guiding the leaders. We have found ourselves in a situation where we are so dependent on one person or the executive team in that institution guiding us, such that we silence our own voice. Hierarchy of institutions has created that dominance and power. And by the way, we talked about this earlier, these relationships that we find ourselves with in institutions is that we are based on monetary success. And yet we come from this context that I'm talking about. It's relational. It was about us getting to the land that we are all aspiring to get to. But before we even go deeper into the crisis that we find ourselves in, let's start understanding in the contemporary what happened to us.
Yes.
The divide and rule. When the international traders that we were trading with decided to settle and become settlers in Africa, they came with a strategy, divide and rule. And they found us weak. We had disgruntlements about each other. We went through a famine. Mdlatule. Most people think there was just a war. It came from a disaster. The disaster called Mdlatule, eat you silently. There was famine. So people had no access to resources. And the competitiveness of resources, it was a resource-based war. And that's exactly where we find ourselves today, because COVID is a resource-based war. I don't care who says what. It's resource. It's assaulting.
Maybe the resources are different, but it's still,
it's resource. Mdlatule was the natural disaster that led to Mfecane, which we failed to, by the way, celebrate. I do, because I'm Ndwandwe and my surname is regional. Because going back into where we came from, we kind of moved back. My surname, you can find it as far as Tanzania. Because it spread, it detribalized us. We came with tribes and we're detribalized by this hectic space. So uncertain situations are really about a transformation and a change that needs to occur. And
in our style of leadership.
So the situation that we find ourselves, that was highlighted by Dumsani, it's just change the way you lead your organization. Organization have to stop depending on one figurehead as a leader and looking at a collective responsibility of leadership. Go back to the place where people sit down together and decide who is going to be sacrificed and given to the crocodiles for us to get to the other side. Because decisions like that are coming. The crocodiles today is retrenchment. You know, nothing much has changed. It's just the circumstances, and there's monetary decisions that have been taken. That's why it fascinates me to look at the indigenous context and find that the realities are not different.
So sure, that's so powerful what you're saying. And I think just to be clear, you don't have to actually throw anyone to the crocodiles.
Yeah,
but
no.
I think as an analogy, what we're saying is getting together with minds, because we all have a creative soul in us. And it's maybe, and I think it's both for leadership and followership to change that dynamic, where followership is not looking always up to some person sitting in an office or in a space or to a name or to a figure, but rather that also the leaders look back and say, come, let's all sit and come up with solutions that best serve us. And the throwing to the crocodile means, what will we maybe need to give up in this space for us to survive, to get to the land, to get across the river, to get to that next place that maybe we've been holding on to for so long. We're going to need to let go of that to take up this new calling and this new collaboration that's going to get us there. Sure, that's so powerful.
Jabu Nkuli Lamdlovu has a very potent contribution. She says, now it's each individual's responsibility to take care of himself. Leaders are there to give guidance.
So that comes back to what we were saying. That actually it's the calling up of the leader in each one of us.
The leader
and no longer
in each
looking
one of
somewhere
us.
else externally. And I think for a while leadership has often been this kind of external abstract thing that we are constantly in search of. And yet we've forgotten that there is a leader in each and every one of us.
And it was created around this context of divide and rule. I'm not bashing the colonial, but they have to take we all have to take responsibility. Because what we did was, when we got into that belief that the government will save us, when we knew we were blessed with land and we let go of the land to go and look for sustenance in private and public sector. That was what we as followers now, we must take responsibility, that believing that the only way we can actually survive is to let go of our land and go and be servants of a master. You know, that is one thing when we believed urbanization is going to sort out our problems and employability is going to sort out
so
our
looking
problems.
for a job,
looking for a
being
job,
employable.
being employable became the dominant paradigm. And that's where we found ourselves in this mess. And yet, governments all over the world can never satisfy 100% of the population. It's impossible. Systemically, they are not organized in that way. So when we take that thought of saying, where's the crisis? The crisis is that governments can't organize everybody in social order. We've got to chip in. Yes, land was depossessed, I understand that, but we also lost our dignity by thinking that if we stop plowing the land and go and plow in an office, we're going to be dignified human beings. So now what's the fight? Monetarization of success, which is now being assaulted very violently by COVID-19, specifically. It's here to say, excuse me.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. I don't care how many billions you have. I'm going to get you. And the people who can save themselves are the people who have access to the land, because they don't have to see anybody for days and work on the land and dignify themselves.
But we've forgotten
We've forgotten that.
How to draw it.
How to draw ourselves into,
how to plant.
Organize our own space,
all those things we used to eat. We don't see them in the fields anymore.
And they're very expensive. I mean, I went to a restaurant that used to sell them. They said, it's unsustainable. It's too expensive. People want burgers because it's cheaper they can afford it. So the whole uncertainty that I was trying to map, that it's really prehistoric. But what we've done is we've let go of our fundamental principles of how to organize ourselves. We've allowed to be fragmented by religious implications, by letting go of our own guidance on supreme being. Try sit next to a Muslim, you're going to start feeling that there is something wrong with them. And yet, if we co-create as a united Africa, as one people, because we are one, irrespective of our religion.
And that's what we have in common, is this belief of a supreme being.
Yes.
Actually, when we look across you know, all the groupings, that is something common. So surely we are more alike than we actually are different.
And that's where leadership becomes a sustainable place, because we are not personality politicking for the sake of creating and fragmenting society. We're really now focusing on the core issues. What is wrong with the system? What systemic interventions can come in here, rather than wasting time on what is your personality as a politician. And that's why when I say I want to train leaders, I want to give them these 5 principles, that I don't care. Whatever public utterance of a leader, can you please give me feedback on how you rate them? Whether that person is a traditional leader, whether that person is a political leader, whether that person is an academic leader, whether that person is a public sector leader or private sector leader or media, by the way. Media is just leadership itself. And if you went through with this lens and you started reading at some of what we put out in the media in these 5 principles, you start seeing where we are in crisis. So there is no specific person or personality that's in crisis. It's a systemic crisis. And for me, it becomes dominant in the era of when we participated in slave trade. And yet slave trade became that downstream because divide and rule surfaced. And the divide and rule created us into political parties, tribalism, and all sorts of cohorts that became this Bantustans that we are now in our thinking, because we are so xenophobic it hurts. Because we've forgotten we are Abantu. We are one people.
Man, I think just one thing that jumped out at me in that space is that we have let go or forgotten the fundamental principles of living that have kept us going and that have brought us to where we are right now. And I'm actually reminded of a quote by Malcolm X, and he says, the one way to get a people to never do anything great is to make them believe they never did anything great historically. And that's exactly what's coming up right now, is that we have forgotten who we were or who we are.
What we
actually
came through.
We've forgotten who we are, and now we're just so caught up in something that we don't even understand. And that's why we're going further and further into the space of divide and further into the space of chaos, because we're just caught up in something that we don't understand and we've forgotten who we are. And that's why when we talk about leadership, we have to talk about identity.
Very important thing. Sure.
Yeah,
no, ladies and gents, if you're just joining us, this is a beautiful morning and we're discussing leadership in crisis. We left the question mark at the end, or the exclamation, depending on how you see it through your lens. But we're here to ask ourselves, essentially, is there crisis? Where is it? What is leadership? All these questions that we consistently ask ourselves, but especially in the context that we are today, Joy. And here's a question from Bridget to speak to that specific issue. What do leaders do if employees, so generally in the space of followership, don't follow COVID regulations? So here we have kind of a leadership directive that has been given, and yet we have people who seem to be choosing, perhaps, not to follow those regulations.
Okay.
What is that telling us? How do we read this? What do we do?
There's 2 aspects of our current dominant paradigm, is that we've accepted rights without responsibilities.
So.
And that's a fundamental problem. You know. Rights have responsibilities. You have a right to come to work, but you have a responsibility to protect yourself. I think for me, COVID is speaking at the right time, where we've taken the rights route to the extreme. Because it's not giving us cosmic and social order, when we're going to take rights without responsibilities. So you have a responsibility to, first, forget about Shirley, me. I have a right to protect myself. And therefore, starting to talk to people about rights and responsibilities for themselves without even talking about the others that are around them is a very fundamental place to start. And the other thing, we're going through a very rebellious wave.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting because I'm kind of trying to figure out where is it going, you know. We're rebelling. We're totally rebelling. But there is such dignity in rebelling for a cause.
Yeah.
A just cause. Not just because I can. And unfortunately for me, it goes back to the same, I make the money for you, you know. I make the money here. Monetarization of success is crippling our value system in a deep and fragmented way. And I don't know who's going to shake us out of that dreamland, because it's really an illusionary state of power. Because it won't change anything. Particularly as COVID is here to tell us we are powerless unless we take those instructions that Bridget is talking about. We're powerless without those instructions.
Sure.
I mean, and that is actually now speaking, and that will lead us into Bonsile Mamba's comment right now. And Shelley, you'll remind me that just as human beings, we're seeking for belonging first and foremost, and then we're looking for identity, and then significance, and then reward. Yeah. But what we've done now is we've flipped that on its head. We're looking for reward first, and not taking into consideration, where do I belong? Yeah. Am I significant? Do I matter? And what is my identity, or what is my role in this space?
And that's so powerful. And I don't think you know, and that's the question. Have we flipped it, or have we simply just, have we been talking a different talk?
Yeah.
If we've amplified, I think that's what you said, this monetarization of success. And that has become now what has gained importance, because it can be seen, it can be felt and enjoyed, that all of a sudden that's what we look to say, okay, I have arrived. We've devalued everything else. And so that now becomes the go-to. But our intrinsic driver, number one, is for purpose.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, what purpose are we serving? We're serving the purpose of feeding our greed, materialism, and corruption, unfortunately. Because it boils down to that. At the end of the day, what are we feeding, really? Because I don't care how much you can consume. It's just never going to be your identity. Yeah. Material consumption and conspicuous consumption is never going to form a part of your identity. But relational basis is what is going to be from your identity, the core of your relationalism. And the relationship comes with first yourself. Do you know who you are? I mean, I always tell people at 42 I had maxed out. I really felt I had maxed out with the material consumption, to the point where I was like, okay, so I have to know who I am. And what I've processed in this point in time is that even if I have 10 meaningful relationships, they mean so much more to me than the junk and all that I kept around me and thinking these were relationships, but those were centered around my conspicuous consumption, because I've been there, done it. All right. And I don't have to go back there, because I know that at the end of the day, you sleep with yourself, and knowing who you are is the fundamental of where we are trying to get to. But people must go through the furnace of understanding that this consumption that they're chasing is just a superficial identity. Sure. And I don't have to say any more, because COVID is here. COVID is the biggest prophet we have. It's got verses for everybody. I have my verse every day from COVID, because I've allowed to tune into the circumstances and the uncertainty that it brings to get my verses out of it.
Sure. It's very powerful what you're saying.
Yeah, Ngoni, thank you so much. Bonsile Mamba says, I like the topic you're tackling today. We must see the importance of land which God gave us. Thanks, Sis Joy, for reminding us that our land is the most important asset God gave us. Unfortunately, we do not see. We have commercialized everything.
Yes. Yeah, and we've spoken to that.
You know, I do a lot of work on land, because the dignity of the land is the dignity of the people. and the dignity of the people is the dignity of the land. That is an interconnected relationship. That is coexistence. That is harmonious human existence. We cannot have that harmony. We cannot have those 5 principles. And Bonsilo, you're right. God gave us that land. And that land we were given so that we can nurture and feed ourselves through that land. And therefore, when we stop cultivating that land, God is thinking, oh my God, they don't understand that they don't need a BMW, but they need the land. Because it's going to feed them. When I studied a lot about Native American belief systems, they say the grass is the hair, and the herbs, as we were talking about, are Mother Earth's hair, you know, because the land is Mother Earth. She births us and she gives us all of this, but we ignore who birthed us, Mother Earth. And going back to the land is where we'll find our dignity, and not in the office.
Sure.
I'm not suggesting people shouldn't be employed.
No, absolutely.
Because I'm not employable.
But I think you speak a very important thing, and I think we brought this up probably in our first episode, Courtesy, when we said, you know, is it possible for us to actually grow our own food? Yes, it is. What's stopping us from doing that? You know, why aren't we doing that, Joy? I remember I was obviously still working with the NGO when we had this last drought situation. And we would go into communities and see the land empty.
Yeah.
And we would ask, why are we not growing our drought-resistant crops? And they were like, no, we only grow maize meal.
Yes.
Mealie meal. That's all we know how to grow. There's no water for mealie meal, and so the land was barren. And that just struck me to say, even when our own survival, when our hunger is being, you know, is threatened, we have this difficulty to cross the road and to say, okay, let's do something different.
Yeah.
What allows us to get stuck to the point that we will choose to go hungry?
Because we've allowed ourselves to believe that the solutions are not resonated within us. And that's the sad part. How do we give in so much power to the institution called government, public and private sector, which are the dominant ones, to believe they will feed us? It's a conversation that needs to happen. And returning to the land is for those who are seen as poor. You know, for me, poverty is when you bring me a can of fish. Because to me, that's poverty. I want to get the pumpkin leaves from the garden. And it's become such a commercialized lifestyle. They call it what? Vegan.
Yes.
It's so expensive. It started as organic, and now it's even, you must eat from the source. Hello, we've been doing this for generations. And I've taken this, Shirley and Courtesy, to a point where it's very personal. I refuse to pick up weight, because I can't imagine how the indigenous woman was this humongous size, because they had no fat in their food.
Yeah.
That's my personal leadership. They woke up at 4 o'clock and worked the fields. So very, very little time to become this absolute person that fills the house, because land was important. And this is the personal leadership that we need to take that into our own hands, my life, with limited resources, to live healthy.
That's very powerful.
Yeah, and Joy is now touching into something that's very important. How do you lead yourself before you can even lead others? And I think that's exactly where leadership starts. Shirley, do you want to take the
So we've got some lovely questions, and thank you so much for interacting with us this morning. Sandra Weatherson, now it makes more sense that service to the people is leadership. A picture in which the leader makes sure that those being led maintain their dignity.
Thank you,
That's
Sandra.
so huge. Thank you, Sandra. You're giving me goosebumps.
I know, thank you.
And I can't walk from Saturday's workout. In parenthesis. But when it comes to health and wellness, Sandra also a real ambassador for that. So we're also talking about that, Sandra, and I hope that's resonating with you. So thank you for what you're doing in that space, making us all more aware of what it means to be strong in our health. So yeah. Paul Nkambule, thank you for your question. Leadership is needed in every sector, says Paul. Leadership is to take action and follow your beliefs. Take action at the right time and take responsibility in making change through influence. And it's understanding, I think, that influence, and this comes back to what we talk to being locus of control. Very often we blame the external factors, right? Yes. We are not a first world country. We don't have access to, we are not influential because we don't have title, or we don't sit with, the leaders of our community, all those things. You know, we feel we have to jump through hoops, we have to know people or name drop along the way, enhance or sugarcoat our CVs to be more important, to actually then be giving a space where we can speak and be heard. And it comes to this locus of control, is understanding that everything we need is actually internally. So until we realize that we have it in ourselves, and we might not be able to change everything, Joy, but ultimately to influence something, to make a decision that concerns me right now, that concerns you, Courtesy, the people I love that are near me, that us together then, that's how we create movement. Where we sit, we discuss, we choose, we say, yes, this is what we're doing, and then we move. And I think too often sometimes we can sit, and this is why people often say I don't like meetings, because we sit, we talk, and then we leave the meeting and all is forgotten. And we can't implement these decisions, these choices we've made that are so vital. And that's when we lose trust.
And when you can't move, when you're comatized, when you go into that when you're comatose, you go into that space. Think about your forefathers who moved barefooted. From the Rift Valley and Equatorial Valley to be here. I mean, how much more inspiration would you need? Because that is your fundamental base. That's that connectivity with all the people that stayed along the wayside, is that you have to acknowledge that moving is the only thing that you need to do for you to survive. If you don't move, I can't pick you up. I can't come and lift you up. I have my own issues to deal with. Government has its own issues to deal with. Governments in Africa have their own issues to deal with. My quest during this COVID is, can we just feed ourselves? Let's, as human beings, feed ourselves. With the little resources that we have, with that little sivanzi, that little patch garden, start somewhere, so that by the time you are hoping for bigger and better, you have dignity, because that land is dignifying you, and you are dignifying that land. What we've done with the commercialization of land in rural areas, I mean, that is another topic on its own. We can't. But there's a leadership crisis in terms of what has happened to our villages in land sale. That is another topic. But what is important that should come out of COVID is that we are leaders. We are born leaders. As followers, we are leaders. And we must lead our own personal lives first.
Man, in the room, Bafana Mjali, Isilda, Wesley, Kevin, Elias, Mbugeni, Jabu, Janine from Baker's Corner, who have provided us with this beautiful breakfast that we'll be enjoying this morning. Stanley Carl, Kerry, Nicole, Lou, Marissa, Bunny Bun, Bonsilia, Paul, Mangalisa, Julie, thank you guys very much for joining us here this morning. And Julie Thring says, where can one purchase Joy's books? Okay.
What is happening is that I have stopped, I'm reviewing all my first books. Okay. Second editions. It's more than 10 years. And the industry is such that, you become history. You refresh it. And also capitalizing on the fact that I'm obviously going to reprint them when I have assumed that DR. Because I have found it's a magic in the industry in terms of opening up a lot of spaces. So everything is on hold until next year. Hopefully that will be republished. I am doing a lot more on reviewing the books, but the publication will have to wait for that official DR, because then that's going to brand me also in a different light.
That's beautiful. And obviously we will be, we'd love to also share that evolution and how it's working, so that people can get in touch with you. Joy, you know, when I was just reading out a little bit on your CV, and there's so much more, ladies and gents, you know, I took little snippets out, but it's so rich. And you know, when we spoke about indigenous knowledge embedded in these values, dignity, governance, peace, you know, feminine power, education, religion, there's a question, and we discussed it a little bit before we went on air. And it's kind of this idea of, and this is just something I was listening to. So there was a gentleman who contracted COVID and had to go into isolation. He survived, was treated and recovered from it, and now is back at work. And he was sharing the story of how in the community they don't want him there. They're almost wanting to push him out. And this is his home. We have this word called Ubuntu, and we use it either loosely in many different interpretations. But generally speaking, I think what we understand from Ubuntu is this sense of community, where we come together, we help each other, we are not isolated. How do we have Ubuntu and stigma coexisting? Is it possible for those things, when we talk, you know, through the subject that we're talking, how do those two things coexist if in fact they do? Okay.
You know, one of the interesting things is when I started my research on my PhD, I wanted it to be Ubuntu, you know. And then as I was going along, I was like, okay, I'm failing to see this, because the tensions are really hard. The decisions that come with that trail, this Ubuntu becomes very glaringly diminished, because decisions have to be taken. So we explain the phenomena of Emazimu having devoured some people because they've disappeared, or some people were given sacrifices along the way. Who knows what happened? I wasn't there, just my imagination. I couldn't tap into it. And when we discuss it as the new religion, as the new liberation theory, if I can say that, at the risk of sounding, it becomes marginalized by our own lack of understanding of the word. Because there has to be these cosmological principles that come with Ubuntu. If anything does not serve cosmic and social order, then we can't call it Ubuntu. If everything doesn't have harmonious human existence, then we can't call it Ubuntu. Coexistence, belief in supreme being. When we are dealing with a personal issue, such as the gentleman was having a stigmatization of a very personal and very, very trying, I think, having that COVID.
But we also saw it with HIV.
With HIV, right? It becomes a very tricky situation for them to accept that they're acceptable personally. It begins with them. Am I acceptable? Am I acceptable because people know that I have COVID? And people haven't seen COVID, so now I'm becoming the symbol of COVID, because nobody has seen COVID. I only experienced COVID.
By the way, what you're saying, it's almost abstract until someone now
has
it.
It embodies it.
Now it's there, it's evident. We see it.
And this person is obviously one of the few rare people who've had that encounter. And therefore, to put them into that box of now, because once I have a stigma with you, I'm actually questioning your judgment and wanting you to explain yourself. And yet this person is also very abstract about this COVID, because they just have an experience, they haven't seen it. So how do I tell you the story? We put people into stigmatization because of the fear of which I relate in the mythology of the ancient world as Lelizimu. You know, this mystic figure that's now come and penetrated the contemporary space, and now we're supposed to relate to it. What that person is going through at that point in time, I mean, we haven't had COVID for a year. So it's very difficult to articulate what they felt and what they went through. So giving people that space to deal with it is where we're at right now.
Yeah.
Stigmas are the most useless force of energy. Instead of investing your time on stigma, invest your time on protecting yourself and wearing your mask, just in case they think, and washing your hands, sanitizer, and the social distancing, rather than trying to figure out how to accommodate someone who's been through such a traumatic state.
So stigma is really about fear.
It's fear.
And what you're saying is it's to almost interrupt that and
Yes.
to say, instead of me fearing man and others,
Yes.
let me see what I can do to
Yes.
protect myself, and in
Yes.
so doing, protecting others, essentially.
Yes. Yes.
But I mean, we understand how fear, infiltrates every space that we're in, and what it does is it separates us.
But
it
we
pushes
needed,
us apart.
Shirley, we needed to be brought to the space. In indigenous context, you don't come in between people when they're standing and talking.
Yeah.
But
You
we
go
were
around.
doing that now. So we needed this assault violently to be taken back to the context of saying politeness, mere politeness. Why come in between people? If those people are talking and they're spitting and laughing, you're going to get it. So we are taken into that place where we now have to go back, because social distancing is indigenous.
It's not a new concept.
It's not a new concept.
But we're
It's-
learning it as new because we forgot it.
We
right?
have to unlearn the way we've been living life,
Sure.
in order to relearn what is within our DNA. Because listen, we haven't forgotten it. It's in our DNA. It was practiced by our forefathers.
Yeah, I think the question is, how do we extract it? How do we pull it back into what is obviously a conscious space? And you have that lovely quote about what is the definition of illiterate in today's space?
Yeah, it's actually by Alvin Toffler. It says the illiterate of the 21st century is not the person who cannot read or write, but it's going to be the person who cannot learn, relearn, and unlearn.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what it means to be illiterate in the 21st century.
And the unlearning is kind of that sacrifice. Is what are you willing to throw to the crocodiles, right? That is not going to serve you anymore. That is not.
Thank you.
It has gotten us this far, but it's definitely not going to get us into where it is we want to go. Sure, lovely. So Joy, I want us to open up the discussion a little bit, and maybe this will kind of round off what we've been talking about. We obviously have always had this feeling that Africa is dormant, is sleeping, is somehow not coming to the fore, not allowing its voice to be heard, always following and not creating or leading in a space. Perhaps from your perspective, why is it that it seems to be that way? And if we look even for our nation of Eswatini, but Africa as a continent, into where we should be moving to, where we should be going, what is it actually going to take? What are some of the things that we really need to be deliberate about throwing to the crocodiles if we are serious about getting to a place where we remember who we are, where we can face crises, where we can be strong, where we can lead, where we can come up and say, here is a herb that can help us, here are ideas that can improve our lives and livelihoods. What is that going to take?
Thank you, Shirley. I think you're now speaking about my project, of that spiritual and academic project, because I'm leading. Most people ask me, why aren't you in a leadership position? I said, I am in a leadership position, leading from behind, and now I'm going to step into that into that indigenous knowledge hub and lead a recreation of our indigenous knowledge integrated with modernity. That is where I have found I can be that face for Africa. I have many colleagues in the region that are doing that, but from the Swazi perspective. And as a Swatini, we are in good space to do that, to take that leadership of recreating that African dream, instead of being about the dress, the language, and the food, and the dance, into actually epistemologies, pedagogies, all the complicated words that academics use, so that we can argue that all that we've been doing since we left the Rift Valley is worth considering in international space. And that's where the integration of indigenous knowledge is. our problem in Africa has been centered around how we have lost our own dignity and don't want to reclaim it. And the dignity becomes a very fundamental part of it, is that it lies in our own knowledges and standing strong and believing that our knowledges deserve that space. And this space can be created by us being a new generation of leader. I'm not going to go and sit and be a parliamentarian, because that would be a useless space for me, for what I want to do. I will not going to go and be a cabinet minister, because that would be a useless space for me. I want to go out into the world with serious knowledge systems and argue internationally about the relevance of this country from an indigenous knowledge space, and the relevance of Africa from an integration of indigenous knowledge and modernity. That is a completely different leadership. I can't do yesterday. I mean, look, we're 52 years of age, and we've had so many ministers. Let those who are interested in that space do that. Let's recreate, let's create new leaders. And that's why this academy is going to create new type of leaders who are looking at Africa from a policy perspective, from a leadership perspective, and saying, let's infiltrate the space. When they come with knowledges that are with policies that are going to help us, can we infiltrate our own indigenous knowledges within those policies? And this is where we've been lacking behind. We have just cut and paste, shop, thank you for giving us this money. And by the way, I worked for donors. I worked for USAID, so I'm not very naive on that. I know what happens when we get donors, and I know what our limitations are when it comes to public policy, is we accept policies that don't reflect our context. And this is what I am leading in this indigenous knowledge hub. And the very fundamental issue when it comes to, sorry to take you back, in terms of our herbs, can we please, all over Africa, get rid of this Witchcraft Act? Because when we talk about traditional healers in the context of witchcraft, I mean, really, who wants to talk to a witch?
Yeah.
I want to go and interview a traditional healer, not a witch, because witch and traditional healer are two different concepts. So we are going to waste time and again, and we won't evolve in a systemic way, because we're talking about systemic institutions that were created to negate our knowledges. So when we are using negative connotations for our own knowledge systems, how do we expect the rest of the world to listen to us? Sure. I mean, good God, I've been called an antichrist because I talk about indigenous knowledge, an atheist because I talk about indigenous knowledge. Where can we ever get to the point of unlearning and relearning in order to allow us to be fed from a dignity perspective? Sure. And it goes back to that dignity. Our dignity lies within us, and it lies within our DNA, and it lies within that grandfather, that forefather who cut the first bush for us to get here. Sure. And this is why I like the fact that I chose this space, because it's bringing good meaning to what I'm trying to articulate. So we have to go back to those places and relearn what our forefathers were meant about, were preserved as a source of dignity.
That's beautiful, Joy. Dignity for me is something that touches me very, very close. I mean, and we could spend hours talking. We could spend the whole day. And unfortunately, we don't have. But obviously, if you want to hear from Joy again, let us know, and we will make it possible. But really, thank you so much. And I think it just goes back to also, I think, just challenging, I think, those who are in a position of influence and leadership at the time is to not feel like you need to have all the answers. We don't. A lot of us don't. But we can definitely come together and share our common or collective genius, our common or collective innovation. We have it within us, and I think it's just to call all leaders up that we need to be confident in what is within us. Too often we doubt it. And that's why we look to external, someone else to tell us what we need to do. And yet we have it all within us. We have every resource that we need. What also came out very strongly, Joy, is just this idea of relationship. And I know that's something that's come out very strongly during this time. You know, the latest cell phone, the latest automobile is not going to get us through COVID. Something needs to change. The shift needs to happen. And we can either live in denial for a long time, or we can actually accept that this is a very uncomfortable, chaotic space, but go into it because it's amazing what happens through this, you know, the spacing, allowing us to be innovative, coming up with ideas that we didn't even think we had. And that's what's beautiful. The space is, we've been given a canvas. Let's jump on it and paint it with our context, our history. I think is so, our stories, hey Courtesy, and thank you so much. You've really blessed us today.
Thank you. And before you know, there's one thing that I'm passionate about is feminine power.
All right.
And that feminine power that is within women, that can do so much for the world, has been subjugated by patriarchy, you know. And everybody's and their brother think success is based on being consumed by patriarchy. And this is why Africa is lagging behind, because we forgot the most fundamental aspect of our women. They were courageous. There were no hospital, but they gave birth. There were all these the conditionalities that were so negating their sustenance, but they made it here. And therefore our great parents were born here. The aspect of feminine power that stands up to any situation, and it is heard because it gave birth to all, has been subjugated and marginalized. And that's a story for another day.
I think we'll need to call you back for that, because my initial question is then, why do we fight each other? Why are we so evil in some cases as women to each other? You know, so, but that's for another day. Please keep, we can do this.
We need Joy to come back right here on the Connect, because it's just too much. So
there was Ralston, who just had hearts in his eyes for Ralston Smith. I just needed to pass on that love note to you. Ralston had hearts in his eyes for you.
And I think just as a parting shot, specifically for Joy, Cyril Gunene says, Ndwandwe, your contribution to human existence is immeasurable. Over time, a long time, much has happened to, I dare say, fatally injure indigenousness and the pride that goes with it. We are so confident yet so ignorant and confused, without knowing or realizing, so much so that it is difficult to say where or how to start helping ourselves. The world plans for us, around us and about us, and we just follow. Yet, if we believed in our own, researched and analyzed our own, perfected our own and applied it, we could use that to demonstrate and place ourselves in leadership. But what will it take? King Sobhuza II said, let us send our children to acquire the white man's knowledge, and let them come back to research, analyze and build our own. We are yet to realize that noble and deep understanding using knowledge, to realize that noble and deep understanding using knowledge to advance ourselves.
Beautifully said. It's lovely. I think we need to keep that as a quote.
Absolutely.
But very sadly, ladies and gents, we wish we could be with you so much longer, but please do come back, Joy, because I think there's much that we want to discuss, and there's much I'm sure that you have also to share with us in this space. But it's been a real blessing, but please stay with us. What we love on the show is really to feature what people are doing on the ground to impact and to influence in their spaces different population groups. And so we have a guest with us that we're featuring today. I think Courtesy is going to tell us who it is.
Where are we starting, Pinky?
Yes, I think we're going straight.
All right, we're going to Girl Boss first. All right, so Girl Boss is a multimedia, content-driven and beauty with a purpose brand that aims to empower and develop women of color throughout South Africa. And with us here today online is Nontle.
Matsebula.
Nontle Matsebula Mpolo. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Very well, and how do you do, ma'am?
I'm very well, thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time out to connect with us here this morning. Look, we could go through your profile and it goes on for days and it's beautiful, but we would just like to hear from you exactly what is it that you guys are doing in the space of the Girl Boss. And I mean, just to piggyback on what Margaret Joy Ndwande was talking about, that holding back women is what is holding back half of the world's potential in terms of just what we can do, what we can be. But here you are in the space of the girl boss, girl power, Powerpuff Girls type vibes. Tell us a little bit more about what you guys are doing in your space and the impact or the reach that you guys have had, and how can we as individuals, especially a network like the Connect, plug into what you guys are already doing.
Okay, cool. Thank you for having me. So Girl Boss was founded on the idea that an article that was released by Forbes in 2015 highlighting that 20% of leaders in Africa were women, and these leaders were the only leaders in the executive positions, just 20%. So Girl Boss was founded on the idea that we need to create a platform whereby a girl between 16 and 25 can reach out and start taking measurements towards uplifting herself, empowering herself, so that she becomes a trailblazer and futuristically becomes a girl boss. So we are a multimedia platform and a beauty with purpose brand. This means that we create multimedia content using all sorts of content, using podcasts, using written content, videos, and we also a beauty with the purpose brand in the sense that we sell beauty products to women or girls between 16 and 25. So what we do is provide content that is very informative, educational, that also provides opportunities and supports the girl child that is between 16 and 25 to become her best self. So the motto for Girl Boss is my world, my rules. Can you hear me? You can hear me. The motto for Girl Boss is my world, my rules, which means that what is it that a girl child can take control of and keep excited about her future? So there are basically like 4 things that a girl child can look towards, that she can control towards becoming her best version of herself. So that's emotional health, that's mental health, that's physical health, and that's spiritual health. So what Girl Boss tries to do is provide content that is constantly uplifting and constantly providing an energy and motivation behind those 4 health reasons that a girl can become her best self. So yeah, basically it's about how a girl can create her own world and also rule it at the same time using her own voice and her own integrity.
Creating her own world and then rule it.
Yes.
With especially integrity. And I think that is, for me, is sort of just like the underlying principle right there.
Yeah, that's your tagline, Girl Boss. I love it. Thank you so much. So how can we as people sitting here, those listening from obviously behind the cameras, what is the call to action? How can we get involved? How can we support? How can we make a difference in what you're doing?
So what we actually do is draw girls between 16 and 25 across Swaziland and across South Africa and invite them to be content contributors of what they are experiencing, how they can inspire, how they can motivate other women as well. So for example, for the coronavirus pandemic period, we've been releasing a lot of content related to like mental health, DIY, beauty stuff at home, how to keep you feeling good. We've been looking at work as well, like having spoken to experts about how to become a remote worker, especially in times like this where you can't go to your place of work, how to make money by becoming a remote worker, and even becoming a digital creator or digital entrepreneur by creating content for social media or for YouTube. And that's just the content part of things. But we also create like facial masks, and we've also been starting to create sanitizers that can help young people also start in terms of like finding a way or an opportunity during this period to make money for themselves and keep themselves surviving and their family. So the best way we could invite people to participate in this is by becoming or volunteering to become contributors, content contributors that could share and some insights to people across or girls across South Africa and Eswatini during this period. Like we've been getting articles from girls who are in high school, grade 11 and 12, talking about how they can keep themselves motivated and still ensure that they pass the year, still ensure that they keep reading, being creative, keep working during this time. We've spoken to change makers like Vanessa Nakate, who's a global climate a global climate activist, and Zuleika Patel, who's a young gender activist as well. How to inspire girls to also follow their passions and their dreams, even if there are lone voices. So it's the same thing that goes back to what Mama Joy talked about, the feminine power. So we try to establish that from a really, really young age, and we really encourage girls to volunteer and to be part of us, to start working on themselves at a very, very tender age, especially knowing very well that girls have been marginalized and have been rejected in a lot of spaces. So we really do encourage girls to reach out to us, start by being a contributor. We also host a number of events where we call it Bossing Up, how to become the best boss version of yourself, where we interact with experts in certain industries and just some trailblazers, just to inspire and keep the girl feminine power going.
Beautiful.
Wow.
Lovely. I love that. Confidence contributor. So thank you very much, Nontle, for coming on and sharing your story. And obviously, please keep sharing all your handles and how people can get involved with you, so we make sure we spread that on our sort of interactive spaces. But thank you so much. Please keep doing what you're doing. And I'm hoping that many out there heard the call to be a confidence contributor, sharing knowledge, influencing the space of the girls to create their own kingdom and rule over it. I love that. It's beautiful. Thank you so much.
And maybe before we let you go, Nontle,
I
understand there is a Eswatini chapter of the Girl Boss.
Sorry, pardon?
I'm saying, is there a Eswatini chapter of the Girl Boss?
Yes. Yes, you can find us on social media on Facebook and Instagram, Girl Boss Eswatini.
Right, awesome. Can you just like, when you log off, just throw those contacts on our comment section so that people will know exactly how to reach out to you guys?
I will definitely do. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank
you,
Nontle.
Nontle. Okay,
Bye-bye.
Awesome. Love that. Confidence contributor.
That's actually
a
quite
lovely
fresh.
thing,
Very, very.
It's quite fresh, especially in a time where we know a lot of people are struggling with self-esteem and such. Confidence is one aspect of ourselves that we need to actually work on quite a bit. But it does actually take you making that decision to lead yourself into that space of confidence.
Absolutely. So I love the idea. Nontle was obviously sharing with us how to start businesses, right? People working remotely from home. How can we start businesses and make it work? And speaking about business, you may have noticed on our set today we have these beautiful bowls. In different colors. Joy, you can see them. They're there in the background around us. So maybe if we could share with you, these bowls are actually from Quasi Design. And Quasi Design is really about designing sustainable sort of either jewelry or sort of these bowls, lampshades, right? They're all about sustainable change, social impact, and creating responsible and thoughtful products. Today I'm donating their earrings, Joy. I don't know if you noticed. This pendant that I'm wearing is also made. What you may not know is it's all made from paper. So all the magazines that you and I buy too many of and then don't know what to do, well, who would have thought that you could actually change them into these beautiful bowls and jewelry. So everything I'm wearing today is from Quasi Design, and we'd like to thank Jabu for giving us all of these things to showcase with you today. So Quasi Design is based in Eswatini. All the products are handmade by local women, empowering them through skill sharing and earning a living wage. They use recyclable materials to create accessories, and it's a founding member of Swaziland Fair Trade. Now, when we spoke to Jabu yesterday, she was actually sharing with us that they have tons of orders that are sitting on the floor. They cannot send them simply because they have not been able to send goods that are non-essential. And she was just saying we would like to reach out to the Minister of Commerce and even people who are involved in the transport to say, is there a way that we could open our borders to ferry all these goods, because people are waiting for them, and Labo Mage are sitting at home not earning a wage because they're not able to export the orders. So this is a way that maybe we can help, is just to say, how can we potentially work together and come up with a with some sort of way that we can send out what we think is non-essential, but when we think that people's livelihoods are actually dependent on that, that becomes essential. How we could potentially send goods out. Obviously there are transporters that are assisting now, but the cost of getting goods overseas is very expensive. So if we know of people, or if there's a way that we could potentially subsidize or help to get these products out there, so Labo Mage can really get to earning their living wage, it would be a way that we could help. So ladies and gents, if you have any contacts, if you are someone that can somehow help, please get hold of Jabu and Doron. We will share all their handles. They are also on Instagram, Facebook. If you are in Eswatini, please get hold of Jabu, go up there. They've got a beautiful little shop, boutique shop that you can go in, buy a pair of earrings, do something so that we can keep Labo Mage just pushing through the stage, and obviously until everything is opened up more, but we don't know when that will be. So let's just lean in and do our part. So that's a little bit on Quasi Design.
And as you can see on the table, we've got all these lovely eats today. They've been provided by Baker's Corner, which is found on the 1st Avenue, Matapa, right next to FNB. Feel free to try their grab-and-go counter lines made freshly daily with locally sourced produce. They offer ready-made meals, cakes, savory and sweet platters, homemade pizza bases, and more. Shout out to Baker's Corner for hooking us up here today. You can find them on Facebook, Instagram, or WhatsApp if you want to find out just a little bit more about who they are and what they do. That is Baker's Corner, our partner this morning for our breakfast eats. You can find more details about them right here on our comments section.
Absolutely. And there's other people also, ladies and gents, and we know we can't necessarily go into restaurants and bars, but who are able to provide takeaway meals. Laxi Garden, also another friend of ours who just shared with me yesterday that they are doing meals, so you can phone in, let them know what you want, pick it up on the way to or from home if you are commuting in the area, and that's also a way just to keep those companies going. When I spoke to her, I asked her, how long will you be able to survive with this shutdown? And she said, not long at all. And obviously there are staff, there are people that really are relying on a wage that they earn from the service they provide in order to survive, and they obviously have dependents and kids. We know the story, ladies and gents. So please, call them up, order your favorite meal, take it home and enjoy it with your family, and you've done something small to really make a huge difference in people's lives. So those are some of the wonderful things we can do. All right. Thank you very much again, Joy. It's been an absolute joy to have you.
Pause.
It's been a joyful day. I'm getting there. And I hope you'll come back, because there's so much more we want to dig out of this richness that you have. But you've been an absolute blessing. Thank you for agreeing to be with us today. Obviously to Net Worth for sponsoring this particular episode. To our team, ladies and gents, you don't see them, and I'm hoping we're going to turn the camera one day and show you what's happening. Normally there would be 20 people behind the scenes. We have a beautiful team. There's Linda Rego, there's Pinky, Nyandoro, there's DT in the house.
Lunga.
There's also Lunga who's with us. And that's it. That's the magic that puts this all together. You were here this morning and saw a little bit of the chaos that happens.
Thank you.
But we really thank you for tuning in, those of you who have joined us. Thank you for those who are sending you your profiles. Remember, we said we're about showcasing what's happening in Eswatini, in the region, in Africa. Connect with us. Tell us what's going on. We want to feature you. And obviously, we want your support in order for us to continue having these wonderful episodes and interacting with you and just shining a light on what is happening during this time. Okay, so that's all for us, but we need to end on a sweet note. It's been sweet right through. But many of you will know that the co-host next to me, he introduces himself as Tamsana. AKA the Courtesy of Hip Hop, and he's done amazing stuff, and we didn't even need to twist his arm, which is so great. There was no coercion. We're going to play out with a live performance from this very talented gentleman. Okay. So sit back, relax, don't cut it off yet, stay with us. We've got a live performance coming up. But thank you very much, everybody. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you.
Into the world we come. And with our first cry as a newborn someone, we've already begun to make our mark upon the earth. We yell, we rebel, we raise the decibel to tell the world that I am here. But we soon find that this world, this great sphere spinning here in the dark, let me stress, it's a work in progress. And so we begin to see why in the world we are here in the world. Because it needs the rebels, the fighters, the champions of change. It needs the leaders and uniters. Our world needs the brave. Those who will bring hope into the places where hope is fading, where injustice is parading in the streets. We need those who will perform miraculous feats due to the dauntless and potent belief that hope can attack, crack, and counteract the most voracious kinds of grief. We need eyes that will see the unseen and hands that will touch the unclean. We need the rebels, the fighters, the champions of change. We need the leaders and uniters. We call on the brave. But what can you, just one person, really do? One can change the full range of where he or she stands. One can shake with ripples and shock waves that reverberate with change, seismic and long range, if you will just choose to be brave. You can rise above the apathies and raise up the capacities of another and then others. Because there's even more in store if we will work as one. Together, we are better. We are stronger than just one. When we entered this world aspiring to matter, our assignment became the fight to scatter the darkness that holds us so tight in the patterns of fear. So before we say our long good night, let's leave a mark. Let's ignite a spark. So we call on the rebels, the fighters, the champions of change. Come, be the leaders and uniters. We call on the brave. Whew, and scene.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And on that note, no more to be said. We call on the brave. Be brave, ladies and gents. Enjoy your day. Bye.
Hello Eswatini, hello world. My name is Tamsanga Sibanze, aka the Courtesy of Hip Hop.
Hello everybody, Sanbonani. I'm Shelly.
For those of you who already know us through the Connect, and for those who are tuning in for the first time, welcome.
Now the Connect was really about taking a chance. We had already hosted a number of in-house events where we brought people together to learn skills and share ideas. We found this hugely valuable.
We always knew we wanted to continue to connect to our followers and listeners, but also to meet new people. And with everything being shut down, we thought this would be a great new way to connect.
Connecting to us is not just about being able to interface. It's a whole lot more. It's about allowing us to self-discover by sharing interesting information from the cognitive and behavioral science space.
Equipping ourselves with practical tools and approaches.
About growing awareness, informing each other, sharing our diverse stories and experiences.
Showcasing what it is that our nations have to offer, what individuals and organizations are doing on the ground, your unique impact.
Now, the situation we are in has in many ways leveled the playing field, given us a chance to stop, think, and do something.
To turn inwards as the outside has been closed off. An opportunity presents itself where we have a captive audience, giving us a chance to tell a story, our story.
Best practice is an important outlook to have today. But often we think that best practice means copy and paste, without considering context, culture, resources, flavor, color, and texture of our unique environment. We want to be able to look into our continent and share with the world what is happening here at home. Provide solutions, share thinking and outlook from here to the world.
You are invited. We call on you to support us so that we can continue connecting on our platforms. Share with us what's going on in your place in the world, the continent, and further afield. We want to exchange ideas, learn from each other, and implement to build solutions that serve us, that are by us, for us.
And it's really very simple. All you need to do is connect with us, the Pacific Institute Swaziland. We are on YouTube and Facebook. And don't forget, we are live every Tuesday.
Peace, love, and happiness, and connect.